Welcome to Hatman Strikes Back Daily Boxing News. So, the WBC are apparently willing to give Deontay Wilder a shot at their interim heavyweight title, the current holder being Agit Kabayel. Let's talk about it. So here we see the story from Seconds Out Boxing. Deontay Wilder is set for a world title shot on his return. WBC interim champion Agit Kabayel seems to be waiting in the, well, I guess they meant to say in the wings, as former champ makes his return. Here, we've got a quote from Mauricio Sulaiman from the WBC, and this is exactly what he's saying here. He's not just saying Deontay Wilder could fight Agit Kabayel, he's also throwing Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury's names in the mix. So he said, Kabayel has the WBC interim championship that he can defend. There's other big fights like Joshua, Wilder, or eventually even Fury. So many other possible great fights. Now, I've long said that I don't like champions, or in this case, former champions, should I say. I don't like former champions being able to leapfrog top contenders who have done more than they have in the past few years to title shots. Now, of course, this would not be a shot at the full title. This would be an interim title shot, but nevertheless, I don't like it. And with the WBC specifically, they put many of their champions into the witness protection program. They give them ridiculous levels of privilege. And Deontay Wilder will be an example of that. And beyond the privileges they give to champions, such as in Wilder's case, only having 2 mandatories imposed upon him in 5 years. Now, you could make excuses for that. You could make allowances for it, should I say, if Deontay Wilder had been partaking in, let's say, mandatory defenses, or excuse me, if Deontay Wilder had been partaking in unifications. But he didn't have one unification. He had an opportunity to unify with Vladimir Klitschko, but he completely swerved it. Shelley Finkel, his manager, spoke publicly about how Wilder's too green and, he needs to be allowed time to develop. No. You do that before you fight for a world title. Once you are a world champion, you have to be willing to fight anyone. Otherwise, how dare you call yourself a world champion? So he swerved Klitschko. He never fought Joseph Parker when Parker was WBO champion. And he was offered over $100 million to fight Anthony Joshua by DAZN in a unification, and he turned that down too. And the mandatories he did have were laughable. Bermane-Stiverne was his first mandatory. That was after several years as champion. And of course, Bermane-Stiverne is the guy he won the title off. And in the intervening period between the first Stiverne fight and when he fought Stiverne as a mandatory, Stiverne only fought once. And that was against a journeyman called Derek Rossi, and he got dropped in that fight. So how on earth the WBC endeavored to make Bermane-Stiverne Wilder's mandatory is beyond my understanding, right? Talk about a soft mandatory for a champion. Bermane-Stiverne will be an example for Deontay Wilder. And Wilder's other mandatory, of course, was Dominic Breazeale. The mandatory who was waiting in the wings for years, who Deontay Wilder outright, openly refused to face, was Dillian Whyte, who was on a very good run at the time. So, yeah, Deontay Wilder had incredible levels of privilege as champion. And what the WBC tend to do with those champions they keep in the witness protection program is they extend the privilege after the guy has either relinquished the belt, retired, or been defeated for it. And I'm going to coin a term here. WBC champions often have what I call legacy privilege. Because they've been champion for a number of years, once they're no longer champion, they continue to enjoy many of the same privileges that they got when they were champion. And an example of that would be Deontay Wilder. Let's just have a look here. This is his record over the past 5 years. Well, yeah, over the past 5 years, since 2020, and the past 5 fights. He's won 1 fight in the past 5 years, and that was against Robert Helenius. Everything else has been a loss. How in the world could a guy like that, who's in that type of form, be even in the same sentence as an Agit Kabayel or anyone who holds any type of belt? It's ridiculous. But because of this legacy privilege that he enjoys with the WBC, Mauricio Sulaiman is putting him in that conversation. Deontay Wilder is currently ranked number 12 by the WBC. So why isn't Mauricio Sulaiman talking about, let's say, anyone above Wilder fighting Agit Kabayel instead? The reason that Kabayel is not on this list is because he's interim champion, so he's above the number one Akoli. And obviously the full champion is Alexander Usyk. So there's quite a few people here in the WBC top 15 who are coming off losses. I mean, truth be told, Derek Chisora should be ranked higher than Deontay Wilder. Try tell me I'm wrong. Think about it. Derek Chisora's last 2 fights were wins over Otto Wallin and Joe Joyce. He should be above Deontay Wilder, several places above. But anyway, you've also got Justice Huni, Aliyev, Hrgovic, Jalalov, Zhang, Sanchez. Again, many of these fighters are coming off losses. Jagbar, Wardley. I mean, why is Wardley not getting a crack? Well, actually, Wardley's going for the WBA regular against Kubrat Pulev, but you get the point I'm making. The idea that Deontay Wilder should be in the conversation is absurd, right? But the legacy privilege is a real thing. The WBC loved that. In fact, they even invented a particular status for a champion who retires without losing the belt, who voluntarily relinquishes it. They call it champion emeritus. And a champion emeritus is able to come back several years after relinquishing their belt to get an immediate shot. That's the legacy privilege I'm talking about. They even have it written into their rules. Now, Deontay Wilder is not a champion emeritus. He lost his WBC belt in the ring. But it's like he's still getting some of the treatment of a champion emeritus, Crazy. So the other names that Mauricio Sulaiman mentioned, of course, were Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury. I don't think any of these guys should be getting a shot against Agit Kabayel for the interim belt. But if we are to, place them in order of who would be most credible for Kabayel right now, I would say Deontay Wilder is the least credible. That fight right there would be the most difficult to justify. The second would be Anthony Joshua, because he's coming off a knockout loss. And although if we look at AJ's record over his last 5 fights, it's been mostly wins. It hasn't been at a particularly high level. Definitely better than how Wilder's been performing lately. But still, this is not the form of somebody who should be getting a shot at the WBC interim belt in his next fight or anytime soon. Tyson Fury, despite coming off 2 losses, probably has the best case, or it's the most justifiable out of those 3 fighters going up against Agit Kabayel. Because although, again, he lost to Usyk twice, he at least was competitive against Alexander Usyk. He didn't get blown out the water like Anthony Joshua did against Daniel Dubois. So, I would say if Fury comes back and gets a crack at Kabayel, I don't like it, but it's not as bad as Joshua or, God forbid, Deontay Wilder getting a crack at Kabayel. These guys need to fight their way back into title contention. They shouldn't be given these privileges because they were champions in the past, particularly Wilder as WBC champion. So, I think it's ridiculous. I hope none of these guys get to fight Agit Kabayel unless they get some, wins under their belt first. Now, in terms of whether I think it's likely, personally, I do. I think there's a high possibility, let's just put it that way, or a high probability that Agit Kabayel will fight one of these guys. Now, I can't blame Kabayel too much because this would be big money for him. I would much prefer him fight, if we go back to the WBC rankings, I'd much prefer him fight a Fabio Wardley, even in a Jagbar, a Lawrence Akoli, one of these guys, a Bakadir Jalalov. I'd much prefer him fight one of those guys, but I wouldn't blame him if he went for an AJ or a Fury or a Wilder, because he's basically the mandatory challenger, Agit Kabayel. And when you've worked your way into that position by taking on tough opponents, as Kabayel has, I can't blame a guy for sitting on that position until his shot gets called. Can't blame him at all. He's done the work. He's, taken the risks and put himself in those difficult positions, those difficult fights, and he's earned the position he's in now. So if he wants to sit on it and, not fight any of the more live contenders right now, the on-form contenders, I've got no problem with that. Just wait for your title shot. And in the meantime, if he does want to earn some money, and Anthony Joshua or Deontay Wilder, look, if he fought Deontay Wilder, Agit Kabayel, to me, that is a gross mismatch. I wouldn't expect Deontay Wilder to last more than maybe 5 or 6 rounds against Agit Kabayel. I think he'd get broken down and taken out. Yes, he's always got the power, but so much of Deontay Wilder's success was predicated on his fighting spirit. Deontay Wilder at his best had a tremendous fire inside him, and that was able to make up for a lot of his technical deficiencies because it was the fire inside of him that really fueled the rocket of a right hand that he has. Since the fire has, I don't know whether we could say it's been extinguished, but it's certainly diminished, the rocket doesn't have so much fuel in it. It doesn't fly quite so fast, and he's not so confident about letting it go because he's thinking about what's coming back at him. So, yeah, if Deontay Wilder was to fight Kabayel, I think I assume most people would be thinking along the same lines as me. I would make Agit Kabayel a huge favorite over Deontay Wilder. I'd make him a favorite over Anthony Joshua as well, but maybe not quite as big a favorite as I'd have him over Wilder. And against Tyson Fury, I think that's a really interesting fight. Tyson Fury's got the height and the reach and the awkwardness and the experience. How would he fare against Kabayel's body shots? Kabayel is clever in the way that he's able to get inside, find angles on you, get those body shots in there. And we saw the effect that Alexander Usyk's body shots had on Tyson Fury, particularly in the first fight. And if Usyk's body shots were having that effect on him, and Usyk is a good body puncher. Let's not diminish Usyk as a body puncher at all. Fantastic body puncher. But Kabayel goes to the body even more than Usyk. He's even more committed to body attack. And as I say, Fury kind of unraveled from about the 7th round against Usyk, in part because of the body punches. Not just because Usyk keeps you under constant pressure, keeps you thinking all the time, and you get mentally fatigued keeping up with what he's doing. It's not only the punches he's hitting you with, but certainly the body shots contributed to Tyson Fury unraveling in that first fight. Agit Kabayel, as I say, is a more dedicated body puncher than Usyk. He's not as good as Usyk in many other areas. That has to be said. So it remains to be seen whether he could get in positions as often as Usyk did to land on Tyson Fury's body without getting hit with too many shots himself. But yeah, that fight in light of Kabayel's recent form is interesting. I'd probably make Fury the favorite, but I certainly wouldn't write Agit Kabayel off in that matchup. Again, not that Fury deserves it, coming off 2 losses, but it's a more credible fight as far as I'm concerned than AJ versus Kabayel or Deontay Wilder versus Kabayel. So let me know what you guys think about this in the comments with regards to what Mauricio Sulaiman said, that he'd be willing to allow Kabayel to fight Deontay Wilder, who is ranked, let's check again, number 12 by the WBC. Also Tyson Fury, who's not ranked at all by the WBC, right? Because he's retired. And Anthony Joshua, where is he with the WBC right now? He's number 2, bizarrely. I don't know why Anthony Joshua was that high after getting starched by Daniel Dubois. Anyway, let's move on from this WBC Deontay Wilder farce or potential farce. Oscar De La Hoya has expressed his disappointment. He feels offended by the fact that Turki Al-Sheikh has teamed up with Dana White, and he's come out with a bunch of comments about, destroying all the other promoters, so on and so forth. De La Hoya says he felt a little offended. So we read, I hear that Turki passed over the reins of boxing to Dana White That comment to me, I felt a little offended. I've been in boxing all my life. I've been promoting for 20 some odd years. So what I want to do is stay in my lane and do what I do for Golden Boy and DAZN and give the fans the best fights that can possibly be made, just like we've been doing for years. Working with Turki Al-Sheikh and Riyadh Season and sprinkling these big championship events, it's an honor for me to do that. But I have my business that I'm going to take care of as well. And nobody's going to touch me there because we are the best developers in the fight game and we take our fighters to championship levels and superstardom like we have with Canelo and Ryan Garcia. All three fights have the potential to steal the show. I guess he's talking about a boxing card here, but it's up to the fighter. You have to fight hard, you have to fight with passion, and you have to make a statement. And anybody could win at any given time. Finally, well, penultimately, he says, I'm going to stick in my lane. I'm going to work with Turki Al-Sheikh because it has been very positive. Competition in boxing is really good, but I'm going to continue to do what I do because boxing is what I love. Boxing is what made me, what helped me get here, and I'm never leaving. Turki has his plans. That's it. If Turki goes without the WBC, then that's his event. He's paying Canelo. He paid for Ring Magazine. He can do whatever he wants to do because it's their event. I'm sure Sulaiman didn't take it well. And here De La Hoya's referring to the incident, if you want to call it that, where Turki Al-Sheikh was on stage with a couple of fighters. I think it was Canelo and William Skull. And they wanted to put the WBC belt in the mix, in the photo. And Turki Al-Sheikh said no. So I think that's what De La Hoya is referring to here. Anyway, he said, I'm sure Sulaiman didn't take it well. I'm sure Sulaiman is thinking, wow, WBC, my father, been around forever. The fighters love the WBC. Sulaiman has to be a little hurt, but I'm not sure what the relationship is or how they're going to work it out. But fighters love fighting for belts. The little fighter from Rialto, California, coming up, fighting for the Continental Regional Championship, to the fighter, that means everything. That's the way I grew up. You grow up wanting to be world champion, WBC, WBA, IBF. It'll be interesting, all right? Those are the words of Oscar De La Hoya. Now, I was watching an interview with Dan Rayfield the other day, within the past couple of days. And he interviewed Dana White. And obviously, Dan Rayfield's been around a very long time. He knows a lot about boxing history. He's a veteran journalist and so on and so forth. And he shares my view with regards to this venture between Turki Al-Sheikh, the WWE guy Khan, and Dana White, in that he doesn't think this will be something that takes over boxing in the near future. Because boxing is so much bigger than MMA in terms of the number of participants. It's a much older sport. Professional boxing under Queensberry rules is like, 150 something years old? During that time, so many promoters all over the world. But if we just think about the Anglosphere, the likes of Bob Arum, Top Rank, the likes of Eddie Hearn, before him his dad, Barry Hearn, Matchroom, Frank Warren, Queensberry Promotions, Oscar De La Hoya, Golden Boy, etc., etc., Al Heyman, PBC. Okay, some of these companies go back decades and decades and decades, long before the UFC existed. They have long-standing relationships with broadcasters, and it's primarily the broadcasters that pay the money to put big fights on. I spoke in a previous live stream or a previous video about how the Saudis and back in the days, Vegas casinos used to pay site fees. But primarily the way that, promoters come up with money to put shows on and pay fighters is from the broadcasters. They front up the money and then the pay-per-view revenue comes in and they split it, right? So broadcasters know that there are many promoters out there who can deliver for them, who've got a history over decades of delivering for them. That was never the case with MMA. It's only really UFC that have this track record of being able to deliver big numbers on pay-per-view. The other MMA companies don't. This is the difference. This is why I think it's going to be much more difficult for, even with Turki Al-Sheikh's money and Dana White's expertise and his track record with the UFC and Khan with the W. Despite all that, I think it's going to be more difficult because there is a more established establishment, right? To use some funny terminology. The boxing establishment is far more established and far more powerful than the MMA establishment outside of UFC. So for them to try and put all this under one umbrella, I'm not saying it can't be done, but I think it's going to take longer than people expect. Okay? And again, boxing has an enormous number of participants compared to MMA. I don't think people who watch MMA really realize this. If you go look up the number of professional MMA fighters there are in the world, folks, it's less than 2,000. Look it up. It's less than 2,000 people in the entire world who are professional MMA fighters. In boxing, it's 24,000. And that's men and women combined, by the way. Less than 2,000 in MMA. Whereas in boxing, you're talking about 24,000 active male fighters. Now, many people will argue, well, of the 24,000 active male fighters, most of them are rubbish. What, are you trying to tell me that out of 2,000 active MMA fighters, the majority of them are good? Even in the UFC, they've got about 700 fighters. That's the estimate that I've been able to find online, right? At any one time, they might have about 700 fighters. Are you trying to tell me that all 700 of those fighters are world-class MMA guys? No, they're not. It's only a small percentage of the 700 that are really world-class, okay? Therefore, the percentage of world-class boxers, or the overall number of world-class boxers that exist, is going to be much higher than the overall number of world-class MMA fighters. Oh, yes, it is, because the pool is bigger. 24,000 active male fighters. Yeah. And then you've got all the amateurs and all that type of stuff, right? So if you use the UFC model, they've distilled 2,000. If you want to be generous, because some people might argue, no, there's going to be more MMA fighters than that. Well, I've looked up on various MMA websites, and that seems to be roughly the figure. About 2,000 active professional male MMA, or male and female MMA fighters combined. Roughly 2,000. But let's be generous and say it's 3,000. Let's say the UFC have managed to distill from 3,000 fighters, the best 700 of them, and sign them up to the UFC. Even though that's not completely accurate, because Francis Ngannou was one of their best fighters and he left to go fight for the PFL. But let's just entertain that argument. From 3,000, they distilled it down to 700. Well, what number are you going to end up with when you've got 24,000 male active fighters in boxing? It's going to be a lot more than 700, isn't it? You're going to have to distill 24,000 down to what? 2,000 or 3,000 minimum? If you want to have something like, the UFC model where you've got the best talent, not just world level, but, regional, domestic, so on and so forth. Because that's what they have in UFC. It's not 700 world-class MMA fighters, is it? There's a handful of world-class guys and the rest of the guys are regional level, domestic level, so on and so forth. So you'd have to take from 24,000 active male professional boxers, you distill it down to maybe 2,000 or 3,000. That is still way bigger than UFC. Way more talent to have to preside over. Way more talent to have to sift through and match up and rank. It's a massive undertaking. It's not something that can be done, in my opinion, in my estimation, quickly. It's something that's going to take a number of years. And it may not even work. We're hearing Oscar De La Hoya showing some defiance here with regards to what Turki Al-Sheikh has said. Basically saying, look, if the reins are going to be given to Dana White to move boxing forward, then we're going to do our own thing. We're not going to play second fiddle to anyone. Now, Oscar De La Hoya has come out with bullish statements before. And some people think that those statements were aimed at Turki Al-Sheikh, and then the next thing you know, he's working with Turkey. So, De La Hoya doesn't necessarily always back up his boasts. And of course, he sold the Ring magazine to Turki Al Sheikh as well. But even if De La Hoya is all bark and no bite, and I'm not saying he necessarily is, but if he is, there are going to be other promoters out there who are not all bark and no bite, who will bite back. And again, I think the potential success of this boxing league for Dana White and Turki Al Sheikh and Khan and whatnot will be contingent on paying the fighters better money, much better money than they pay them in UFC. Dana White is a miser. He's somebody that doesn't pay fighters what they're worth. His company is extremely greedy and they don't respect the very thing that the fans are actually paying to watch, which is the fighters. They're not paying to see Dana White. They're paying to see the guys get in the ring who are literally risking their health, life, and limb, giving the fans entertainment. They are not paid in the way that they should be in the UFC, given the fact that they are the attraction. Dana White is not the flipping attraction. It's the fighters. In boxing, it is acknowledged through the business model that the fighters are the attraction. Hence, it's the inverse in terms of the split. In boxing, it's like the promoter gets 25%, the fighter gets 75%. There or thereabouts. In UFC, it's the other way around. The promoter gets 75% being the UFC, the fighters get 25 or even 20%. That's why UFC is such a massive company. I don't see that flying in boxing. I just don't see it. Because fighters for decades have seen people get, tens of millions for fights, in some cases hundreds of millions. If Dana White tries to impose the UFC economic model on boxing, well, you don't think there's going to be a load of boxers saying, what the hell's going on here? I mean, they're already trying to apparently circumvent the Ali Act or get the Ali Act removed. Right? The Ali Act not only prevents promoters also acting as a fighter's manager, but another thing that the Ali Act does is it allows fighters to be able to see the exact financial breakdown of a boxing show, to therefore make a judgment on whether they're getting screwed over for money or not. Without the Ali Act, the fighters don't get that kind of transparency. You see? And so you can understand why Dana White would want to get rid of the Ali Act. The Ali Act doesn't apply in MMA, apparently. That's why he's been able to get away with all the stuff he's been doing over there. And again, because the money in MMA is so low, it's so small compared to boxing, where else are these MMA fighters going to go? I'm not aware of any other MMA houses other than PFL when they did the deal with Ngannou, maybe a couple of other guys. For the most part, I'm not aware of any other MMA promotional companies that have a boxing style economic model where the fighters get the bulk of the money. I'm not aware of that. So who is really going to draw fighters away from UFC? You see what I'm saying? Whereas in boxing, if Dana White and Turki try go down that road of paying fighters chicken change, do you know what I mean? Then that's going to stand the legacy promoters in good stead. You see it? Even if Turki's got pockets as deep as the oil wells in Saudi Arabia and he's pouring all this money into this new venture with Dana White, if they're not paying the fighters more than Eddie Hearn would pay him, using the traditional model, or more than Frank Warren would pay him, or Bob Arum, or whoever, then the fighters are not going to go to that league, or at least they're not going to stay in that league. They'll go back to the traditional promoters, even an Al Heyman. This is the Achilles heel with trying to bring the UFC economic model into boxing. The competition is more fierce as far as promotional companies than it is in MMA. And we're just getting maybe a taste of things to come potentially from the likes of Oscar De La Hoya, barking a bit here. Eddie Hearn has been kind of hinting that he will fight back, but it remains to be seen whether they actually back up their boasts. Anyway, moving on. The rumor the other day, which was reported by Ring Magazine and various other boxing outlets, has been dismissed. And talking about, of course, the rumor that Dmitry Bivol and David-Benavidez are close to coming to terms. This has now been dismissed by David-Benavidez's manager. He said that it's fake news, and he said, I hope it becomes a reality because we would love that fight. He says, I've sent an offer, but I've not heard back. There's been no negotiations, just one letter. So there has been some contact. So it's not completely, unfounded, this rumor. Benavidez's team have sent a letter and an offer to Dmitry Bivol. They haven't heard back yet. Presumably Bivol is having a bit of a dilemma. Does he bow to Turkey's wishes and not go ahead with this fight? Or does he, say, to hell with that, I'm going to go fight David Benavidez, maybe on a PBC show, or maybe allow this one to go to purse bids and get my promoter Matchroom to bid on it. So we shall see, but yeah, no, as far as, Benavidez's manager is concerned, there's no negotiations going on per se. It's just one offer sent and no word back. All right, so that's that. Another bit of news here. Chris Eubank Jr. has been fined $100,000 by the British Boxing Board of Control. And I'll get on to Super Chats in just a moment. I'm just going to run through the rest of these stories here. So shout out to everybody in the live chat. So Chris Eubank Jr. has been fined $100,000 for the Conor Benn egg slap incident. Well, we don't know what Chris Eubank Jr. asked of Turki Al-Sheikh by way of a fight purse, but he said it was a diabolical number. Could it be 10 million, 15 million? Who knows? It's going to be in the millions for sure. And it would presumably be the biggest payday that Eubank Jr. has ever had. I think he got a payday of maybe 2 or 3 million in the World Boxing Super Series against George Groves. You guys can look that up. Again, don't quote me on the exact figure. So this presumably will be many times more than that. Let's say, was asked for 10 million or whatever. $100,000 isn't going to hurt him that much, is it? Plus the $50,000 he says he's going to pay to those fighters that, didn't get to fight on the original Eubank Jr. Conor Benn card. So, yeah, $100,000 fine for the British Boxing Board of Control. You have to imagine that the British board actually like when incidents like this happen so that they can fine you these arbitrary figures. How do they come up with these figures? Do you know what I mean? An egg slap is $100,000. Where does that money go? Does it actually go into the running of the British Boxing Board of Control? Or do board members get bonuses from this money? I don't know where it goes. Because the figures always just seem so random. Does it mean that Robert Smith and various other board members can go on nice Caribbean holidays? You guys tell me. I'm not making any accusations. I've just always found it kind of interesting the way they come up with these figures. $100,000 to Chris Eubank Jr. might not be a lot of money, but to the average Joe, that's an enormous chunk of change. That's like, what is the average wage in the UK? Yearly salary. Is it like 35 grand or something? Yearly salary? Let's say it's 35 grand in the UK, right? It's higher in London, obviously, but nationally it might be about 35 grand. So 100 grand is approximately 3 years' salary for the average Brit. For Chris Eubank Jr., it's a drop in the ocean, But still, let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section below. Eubank Jr. getting fined 100 grand for the egg slap. Do the British Boxing Board of Control actually like these incidents because they can cream money out of them? All right, Anthony Joshua apparently firing on all cylinders, according to Eddie Hearn, and could take on Daniel Dubois next if he doesn't get the Tyson Fury fight. I said after AJ got knocked out by Dubois that he should retire because he had those comeback fights, the rebuilding phase of his career, and it didn't pay off. And so the way I look at it is going through that process with various different coaches and apparently finding some form with Ben Davison, although I did say that the Dubois fight would be the first real test of that relationship with Anthony Joshua and Ben Davison, and they failed that test miserably, okay? But yeah, AJ at the age he is, mid-30s, he had his rebuilding phase, which I think was probably too little too late. He needed that type of development stage of his career earlier on, maybe before he even challenged for the heavyweight title. He was rushed to world level. So maybe it was too little too late. And the way that AJ reacted after getting stopped by Andy Ruiz was to show that he had a lot of demons in his mind. He became gun shy. He became shell-shocked. Some people would even go back to the Vladimir Klitschko fight where he got dropped and said he was never the same after that. Whatever the case may be, the Andy Ruiz fight certainly made it worse. And then the Usyk fights made it worse still. So what's he going to be like now coming off the back of the worst defeat of his career to Daniel Dubois? In my view, he should just retire. But if he insists on carrying on, he should fight his contemporaries and nobody else. His contemporaries being Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder, Dylan White, etc. I don't think he should go anywhere near Daniel Dubois again. Now, some people would say, why not? Why are you trying to protect AJ? I'm not trying to protect AJ. I'm trying to protect, for one, the integrity of boxing. Why should Daniel Dubois be fighting a guy who he just knocked out in 5 rounds? What for? Where's the need for that rematch right now? You didn't hear people calling for Deontay Wilder to fight Zhilei Zhang again after he got starched, right? So why should Anthony Joshua get the opportunity, for one, to fight for the heavyweight title again, coming off such a one-sided beatdown? It's ridiculous. So no, I'm looking out for the integrity of boxing. Anthony Joshua's health, yeah, I mean, I care about the health of any fighter who goes on too long. And there was nothing in that first fight that would lead me to believe that Anthony Joshua wouldn't be in for more of the same in the second fight. And things can get dangerous, for these fighters. So, yeah, I think AJ, if he knows what's good for him, should steer away and stay well clear of Daniel Dubois. And certainly the heavyweight division doesn't need that fight, a rematch between the two. AJ should fight, again, his contemporaries, Dylan White, Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury if he can get it. That's my view. Moving on to another story here. So the promoters of Bakram, and I always butcher this guy's surname, Murtazaliev, the guy who stopped Tim Tszyu. His promoter Main Events have come out and said that they, or Turkey on behalf of them, did send an offer to Virgil Ortiz to fight their guy. And Virgil Ortiz's people turned it down. And here you can see Virgil Ortiz reacting to what Main Events are saying. Okay? He says, please tell me what all terms he agreed on. So is this Virgil Ortiz himself tweeting back or a member of his team? I'm not sure, but he says, please tell me what all terms he agreed on. And you, since you act like his manager, because this is all new to us, all right? Terrible English there from Virgil Ortiz. But here's what Oscar De La Hoya said, contradicting Virgil Ortiz. Look here. He said, I don't like the Murtazaliev fight. Not coming off Boachuk, not coming off Madrimov. In boxing, there's rules. If you want to take care of a fighter and not have him burn out, you don't put him up against a beast. You burn out the fighters. So I don't like the fight. So here we have Oscar De La Hoya publicly ducking the fight on behalf of his guy, Virgil Ortiz. Now look, I'm not a Virgil Ortiz hater. I picked Ortiz in his last fight. A lot of people didn't. The vast majority of my subscribers didn't pick Ortiz. They picked against him. Okay? I picked Ortiz to win the fight on points, and that's exactly what happened. So I'm not an Ortiz hater. But I don't know what else to call this other than a duck. Murtazalayev is a champion at 154 pounds. Why wouldn't Ortiz want to square it with a champion? Yeah? I know he's on a good run right now. Again, Boachuk, some people think that was a controversial decision, but he beat Madrimov fair and square. Be that as it may, if you're operating at the highest levels in boxing, and Ortiz is some kind of champion, isn't he? He's not. Is he a full champion? I don't think he's a full champion, is he? He's like an interim champion or something. They've got so many of these secondary titles in boxing. I guess that's what Dana White is looking to eradicate and eliminate. And that's another thing I forgot to mention, actually, with regards to this Dana White Turki Al-Sheikh Boxing League, is the weight classes. Dana White is looking to reduce the weight classes maybe down to a similar number that as they have in the UFC, or down to the classic original weight classes in boxing, which were, I think, 8. Currently, there are 18 weight classes in professional boxing if you include bridgerweight. But there, again, is a bit of an Achilles heel for this Dana White Boxing League. Because if you're not catering to the other, 8 or 9 weight classes will be missing out, or 9 or 10 weight classes will be missing out in the new boxing league, then the other promoters will cater to those weight classes. Do you see what I'm saying? So there are many issues, I think, with this boxing league. Anyway, back to Murtazalayev and Virgil Ortiz. It is what it is. Many fighters, even some great fighters over the years, have avoided certain fights. And right now, Oscar De La Hoya is saying that Virgil Ortiz is not going to be fighting Murtazalayev anytime soon. He thinks it's too tough a fight for him off the back of Boachuk and Madrimov. What do you guys think about this? Give me your comments. So yeah, that's the news I wanted to cover. This, of course, is Murtazalayev's BoxRec page. And we'll now get to your questions or comments and super chats. So shout out to everybody in the live chat. Let's get to the super chats first. Shout out to Mr. Luca. He says, is Ortiz better than Parker and Zhang? Is Ortiz better than Parker and Zhang? I guess you mean Luis Ortiz. I would say no. Joseph Parker has got a much better resume than Luis Ortiz. And Zheli Zhang does as well. Who's Luis Ortiz ever beaten? I'm assuming you're talking about Luis Ortiz. Ortiz's best win was Bryant Jennings, right? Other than that, he's beaten, Charles Martin? Zheli Zhang beat Deontay Wilder, although a faded version. And you have to also bear in mind that Zhang is an old man when he's beating Deontay Wilder. So he's no spring chicken himself. Many people think he deserved the win over Filip Hrgović. And of course, he stopped Joe Joyce twice. That is much better than anything Luis Ortiz has done. So no, Ortiz, in my opinion, definitely not better than Zhang and definitely not better than Joseph Parker. Ortiz was really a construct. He was, construct is probably not the word I'm looking for, but he was created by PBC as this, boogeyman of the heavyweight division in order to legitimize Deontay Wilder as champion. And Tyson Fury, of course, participated in this building up of Ortiz as some kind of boogeyman in order to legitimize Wilder and therefore give his victory over Wilder more credibility, more significance. That's what he was all about. Luis Ortiz was a manufactured, that's the word I'm looking for. Ortiz was a manufactured boogeyman. He never was a real boogeyman. He never proved himself by beating top guys that he was a boogeyman. No. I mean, Michael Hunter beat Martin Bakole. Has Luis Ortiz beaten anyone as formidable as Bakole? I would say no. So, yeah, Ortiz, a manufactured boogeyman. Shout out to Mr. Luca. Shout out to Hyro for the super chat. He says, will Turki and Dana normalize lower fighter pay by eventually taking over the start of career funnel for next gen of boxers? Well, that's what they would want to try and do, presumably. Well, Dana White certainly would want to try and do that. But as I said earlier on during the stream, I'm not sure whether that's going to be possible because there is a legacy going back decades and decades and decades of fighters getting paid large sums of money based upon the traditional split in boxing, which is like 25% for the promoter and 75% for the fighter, there or thereabouts, at least main event fighters. So how are you going to sell fighters on the inverse of that split? If you try to pay fighters the pittance that you pay them in UFC, then surely that's going to empower the legacy promoters, the Eddie Hearns, the Frank Warrens, the Oscar De La Hoyas, the Bob Arams, even Al Heyman. They don't need the money of the Saudis in order to pay fighters the money they've been paying them all these years without the Saudis. Do you understand what I mean? So I suspect that this boxing league will be forced by the market to pay fighters a lot more money if they want to take over. A lot more money than UFC would pay them, would pay their guys. But yeah, shout out to High Roll Protagonist for the super chat. Shout out to Striker over there in Australia for the super chat. He says, just got done watching Keith Thurman dismantle an overmatched Aussie fighter down here. They're building to Tszyu versus Thurman this year in Australia. Yeah, I just saw the knockout of Brock Jarvis. And I remember when Brock Jarvis got knocked out by Liam Paro in one round, who got absolutely starched by Liam Paro. And Liam Paro is not a massive puncher. He's got decent power. Southpaw, obviously. But the fact he just blasted out Brock Jarvis in a round, I think, showed Jarvis's level even then. And prior to Jarvis being knocked out by Liam Paro, I vaguely remember him being rocked in other fights. He's a very rudimentary fighter, Brock Jarvis. So to be getting taken out in 3 rounds by Keith Thurman, who I think has had one fight in the past 5 or 6 years prior to this. I mean, the guy looks like an old man. His hair's all thinning on top and whatnot. Fighting 154 pounds. Again, it shows the level of Brock Jarvis rather than Keith Thurman being back, So yeah, I saw the knockout. I didn't watch the whole fight, but it is on YouTube for anyone who wants to have a gander at it. Shout out to Striker for the super chat. And as far as Tszyu versus Thurman, that's the fight that Tim Tszyu should win, as long as he hasn't taken too much psychological or even neurological damage from the Murtazalayev loss. And, we'll have to see how he is after that. But yeah, Keith Thurman is old enough and inactive enough for Tim Tszyu to surely be getting the better of him at this stage. But what say you, Striker? How do you think Tim Tszyu would get on against Keith Thurman if that fight does happen later on this year in Australia? Let's get to some other questions and comments here. So I think Waffles are great. Says, Hatman, I have a question for you. You said a friend should not go after a friend's ex. Will Ospreay's, a wrestler took his boyfriend's wife and is raising his son as his own son, as his boyfriend died? That is very bad. Okay, not even a boxing question. And the way you phrased it, I don't quite understand what you're saying there, but shout out to you. I think Waffles are great. Raymond Hales says, Hatman, I think you're tough on AJ. Well, this is the irony, right? AJ fans think I'm tough on him, and Fury fans think I'm an AJ fanboy. So you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Craig says AJ is a busted flush, totally done. Hearn trying to promote the fight off of a 2-punch combo that AJ landed. Indeed. AJ had about 10 seconds of success against Daniel Dubois. How is that justification for a rematch? Shout out to Ayed. He says, the overhand right Thurman threw was so predictable, yet Jarvis still got hit by it. Indeed. Jarvis showing his level, and it's not particularly high. Okay, I see what you're saying, Waffles, BF as in best friend. So basically his best friend died and then he married his best friend's girl. Well, that's different, because, for example, this is my understanding of it, Muslims believe that you have a duty to take care of widows, in the Islamic community. Again, if there's any Muslims out here who want to correct me, please do so in the live chat. But my understanding is in the Quran, there's something about having a duty to take care of widows, right? And that might mean marrying a widow of, a brother or a cousin or whatever the case may be in order to take care of her. Yeah? So there's that precedent. Not that you have to agree with everything in Islam. I don't agree with everything in Islam, obviously. But I don't think it's necessarily that bad. The friend is dead. He's with the girls. He's with the best friend's wife now, or married her. I mean, I guess you could say maybe he had his eye on her the whole time. Well, okay, some friends are going to have very nice looking women. You might have your eye on them, but a man cannot be judged by his thoughts, because you can never know somebody's thoughts. You judge him by his actions, People have many dark thoughts, but what makes the difference between a good person and a bad person is whether you choose to act on them. Is there something in you that stops you from acting on the darker aspects of your nature? Yeah? And at least the friend waited until, his best friend was dead. Then again, who knows if he was cheating with that, woman the whole time. I don't know the situation, but in principle, marrying a widow of a friend who died, I don't think it's that foul, personally. But then again, we live in different times. Maybe in the ancient world, it would have been more understandable, because women didn't have the ability to earn and make their way in life the way that they do today. So, back in the ancient world, you could say, but actually it's quite an honorable thing to marry your dead friend's wife, because again, she can't look after herself. But in this day and age, you have to imagine she can look after herself. So why are you marrying I don't know. We could debate that all day long. There are two sides to that. Shout out to Mr. Classic Metal for the super chat. He says, rumor has it that Thurman is still fighting because he needs the cash for a hair transplant. Very good. Shout out to G-Man in the chat. Yeah, Keith Thurman has never been the same. Shout out to Aubrey over there in South Africa. Big up, big up. Yeah, Keith Thurman has never been the same since he married that woman from Nepal. He turned all hippie, and he was always a little bit hippie, Keith Thurman, but once he married that, I think she's Nepalese, right? His wife? Once he married that Nepalese girl, Thurman became, besotted with her and completely fell out of love with boxing. Again, one fight before this Jarvis match in the last 6 years. You can't blame that purely on injuries. A lot of people chiming in on this question from, I think waffles are great about the best friend marrying the dead friend's wife. Or the dead friend's ex, or whatever the case may be. Alan says Kabayel stops all three of them. I guess you're talking about Fury, Joshua, and Wilder. I think he'd probably stop Wilder and Joshua. Would he stop Fury as well? That's an interesting take. I'm not saying he couldn't, but Fury, I think, is tougher than the other two. B-Tech Grime in the house. Shout out to Fight Sport Talk as well. B-Tech Grime says, off topic, but I swear, True Geordie copies your opinions in his boxing videos. Well, I'm not sure whether he does, but I don't have a monopoly on particular opinions. Perhaps I might be the first one to express certain opinions, but people can come to the same opinions independently of each other without watching each other's content. Although I do know that True Geordie has watched my content over the years. He actually turned up in the live chat of a live stream that I did a few months ago and bigged me up. So, no beef there. He's doing his thing, and I do watch his videos as well from time to time. His live streams during fights with his boys are quite entertaining. Stephen T says, the British board are cleaning up 100K for an egg. Yeah, it's crazy, right? Maybe they like these incidents. Maybe when one of these incidents happens and publicly they're condemning it, oh, this was terrible. They brought the boxing into disrepute, while they're wagging their finger publicly. Behind the scenes, they're rubbing their hands together. They're loving the incidents because, these arbitrary fines are incredible. Who comes up with a number, 100 grand for an egg slap, Who comes up with that? How is that decided upon? Yeah, a lot of people still asking for food reviews. Watch this space. Ayed says the British board loved punishing Chisora. They did too. Alex Fella says, nice little 100 grand cash in hand for wee Robert W. Smith. All right, David says, I swear down, Pepper and Spice restaurant in Tottenham has got the best Jamaican patties in North London. There was a place in Camberwell Green, opposite Nando's, directly opposite Nando's, Camberwell Green, a Jamaican place that used to do very good patties because they baked them fresh. So there was nothing like going in there, as is the typical, Jamaican restaurant or Jamaican takeaway, where you see all the patties down in like the refrigerated part where they keep all the food and then they heat it up in the microwave. Oh, no. That place in Camberwell Green opposite Nando's, they used to bring out the big trays all the time, like throughout the day. Like Greg's, when Greg's are bringing out pasties and whatnot and pies on their big trays. Yeah, that's how they would do it all the time at that place opposite Nando's in Camberwell Green. Fresh patties all the time. Yeah, they were one of the better places in London for patties, but that was way back in the day. It's been many, many years since I went there. All right, somebody's saying I missed their super chat. Okay, you just sent it a few seconds ago. Ben sparring Denzel Bentley this morning. Good prep? Well, stylistically, very different to Eubank Jr., but Bentley, I guess, is sharp. He's in his prime. Not that he's ever been an amazingly high-level fighter, but you might argue he's on the same level as Eubank Jr. or a similar level. Did pretty well against, oh God, I forgot the guy's name now. The middleweight champion, the unified middleweight champion, Southpaw, who Bentley went the distance with. Why have I forgotten his name? Somebody remind me of his name in the chat, please. Unified middleweight champion from Kazakhstan. What's his name? All right. Nobody giving me the name. Help me out here. Somebody says 100 grand for an egg, but nothing for injecting steroids. Thank you. Janabek Alim Kanuli. Thank you. There you go. Yeah, so I reckon it's decent sparring just to get sharp and just to get used to the size of Eubank Jr. Pause. But stylistically, Bentley is nothing like Eubank Jr. But yeah, shout out to KO for the super chat. But on the patty thing, the best patties you're ever going to have, Tony S says patties are meant to be flaky. Yes, and that place opposite Nando's in Camberwell, their patties were very flaky. Yeah, their patties were excellent. Somebody talking about Brown Eagle. Well, yeah, people used to talk to me about Brown Eagle and Wood Green. I never went to the Wood Green one. I went to a couple of other Brown Eagles because they've got a few restaurants in different parts of London, and it was absolute trash. Some of the worst Jamaican food I've ever had in my life was when I went to Brown Eagle. So maybe they're not the same as they used to be, or maybe it's only the Wood Green branch that's any good. But absolute trash. But when it comes to patties, you really have to go to the Caribbean for good patties, you know? Juicy patties in the Caribbean do not taste like the supermarket juicy patties that you get in the UK. It's not the same. You know, juicy patties in obviously Jamaica, but even in Barbados, they got juicy patties in Barbados, and they're fantastic. You know, you can get them anywhere. Go to the gas station, right? Petrol station in many Caribbean countries, and they sell juicy patties, and they're better than anything you'll get in the UK and any Caribbean or Jamaican takeaway. It's a weird thing. You know, I've been in Caribbean airports where they sell juicy patties in the airport, and they're better than any patties I've ever had in any Jamaican restaurant in the UK in my life. It's one of those ones. I don't want to ever go, you know, to buy a patty and they stick it in the microwave. You've already lost. Simple. You've lost the competition. If I ever go to some of you guys' suggestions, right, for a patty shop, if I return to the UK and go to these places, as soon as they put it in the microwave, it's done. It's over. There's no way they can win the competition. There's no way they can be called the best of anything if they're putting it in the microwave. I want to see it fresh out the oven on one of them big trays. That's how the patty has to be. Or at least, you know, once it comes out one of their big trays, put it in one of those like glass things where they keep it hot, where it shouldn't need to be microwaved after that. I think waffles are great, says, would you ever try Japanese food? The omelette rice and burger combo you see on Instagram Reels looks good. I've never been particularly interested in Japanese food, to be honest with you. It looks very pretty. You know, the Japanese, the way they do everything is very neat. They make a lot of their architecture, for their traditional buildings anyway, is like a work of art. Their food is a work of art. They dress in a very neat way. So everything about Japanese culture is aesthetically neat, isn't it? So it looks neat and whatever, but I've never really been compelled to want to eat it. Afro Jam says it depends. Juicy patties and Ocho Rios is garbage. The tourist areas, they have toned down the spices in most restaurants. That's a damn shame. Because, you know, I've had juicy patties in various places in the Caribbean, and they've always been fire. Always been fire, from the gas station to the airport to, you know, roadside vendors and takeaways and so on and so forth. And they've always been fire. And in fact, speaking of Barbados, if there's any Bajans in here, probably get offended by what I'm about to say, but Bajan food, I'm just going to be real, is mid at best. Right? The food in Barbados is overall, I might even want to just call it trash. Yeah? And so, whenever I've been to Barbados, I've stuck to Jamaican food when I've been there. Yeah. And I don't rate Jamaican food as highly as many other people. Jamaican food is cool. It's nothing amazing. I've long said that Somali food is better than Jamaican food. I'm just telling you straight. Somali food is better than Jamaican food, and there's a whole heap of other African cuisines that are better than Jamaican food. But anyway, Jamaican food is cool. When it's done right, it's nice. But yeah, when I've been Barbados, bro, I'm sticking to Jamaican food there because I really don't rate their food. in Barbados, I don't rate their food. Okay, somebody says, can't lie, the patties I've had in Costa Rica are all dead. Yeah, they are dead in Costa Rica. Yeah, the patties in Costa Rica are dead. I will say that. There's a couple places in Puerto Viejo, because there's a lot of Jamaicans that live in Puerto Viejo. That's on the Caribbean coast of Costa Rica. There's a couple places there that do some decent patties. But generally, yeah, patties in Costa Rica are not the one, because Latinos do their own version of patties, you know, and they're not amazing. Lincoln says, where did you taste Bajan food? In Barbados. Yeah, in Barbados. It was trash. I don't know, there's something about Bajan food that's just, they don't get the spices right, or the flavor combinations are just kind of bland. I don't know what it is. It lacks character. The only thing I really liked about Bajan food was the fish cutter, and that's one of the most simple things that they have. Is a fish sandwich. You know what I mean? But the fish cutter is decent. But other than that, Bajan food is not the one, mate. Jamaican food is better than Bajan food. Hands down. Imagine Jack says, yeah, Puerto Viejo, the Caribbean food is pretty weak in general. Like I say, you got to go to the Caribbean for Caribbean food if you want the best of it. But I don't know whereabouts in Costa Rica you are, if you're in Costa Rica or which parts of Costa Rica you know. But in Guanacaste, in the Pacific Northwest, places like Playa Flamingo, Tamarindo, obviously, the food scene is fantastic. It is fantastic. I mean, in Tamarindo, there are so many great restaurants and eateries and so on and so forth where the food is elite. Absolutely elite. I'm going to tell you this right now. The best panini I've ever had on planet Earth, and I've been to many countries, folks. The best panini I've ever had on planet Earth is a place in Tamarindo called Breaking Bread. Their paninis are next level. Next level. So yeah, the food scene, particularly in places like Tamarindo, is really, really good. Just to give, a couple of spots to you. For breakfast, paninis and coffee, fantastic Breaking Bread in Tamarindo. That's a fantastic spot. I don't want to, give out too many of my favorite spots in case you catch me there. But there's another great place in Tamarindo called Green Papaya, where they do like a fusion of various, Latin American food, Caribbean food. Like I say, it's fusion food, but it's very, very good at Green Papaya. Great place, incredible fresh ingredients, so on and so forth. Green Papaya's levels. And there's actually a sushi place. I'm not really big on sushi and Japanese food, but there's at least one sushi place which people from America and all over are always ranting and raving about in Tamarindo. Oh, you're in Puerto Viejo. Okay. Pura vida. Pura vida. Do I have Bitcoin Jungle? No, I don't. Okay, it's an app that tells you all the places in Costa Rica you can use Bitcoin instead of fiat. I'll have to check that out. Thank you for the heads up. Yeah, definitely check out green papaya. Tony says, what is in the panini? Well, they've got different kind of paninis there. Breaking bread, but definitely check it out. The bread is fantastic. I mean, it's divine. Incredible food quality. Yes, Majin Jack. Pura vida. Seth says, Hatman, try Eritrean food. You might like it. Yep, I'm definitely going to. Eritrean, Ethiopian food. Have I ever been to Cancun? No, I've never been to Cancun. Somebody talking about Puerto Rico. I don't live in Puerto Rico. I've never been to Puerto Rico. There's another spot which used to be really good, but I don't know. No, it's still pretty good. Not as good as it used to be, though. Then again, sometimes you go there and it's good, and other times you go there, it's like, eh. And that is El Chiringuito, which is on the beach in Tamarindo. El Chiringuito. It's a nice spot. They do, relatively nice food there most of the time. I used to go there a lot for breakfast burritos. El Chiringuito right on the beach. Somebody asking about Bahamian food. Bahamian food is cool. We have our version of rice and peas and whatnot. And, conch salad. And it's heavily seafood oriented Bahamian food. It's cool, but it's not levels. Kyle says, do you like Zimbabwean food? Zimbabwean food's a bit bland, truth be told. It's cool, sadza and samp and greens and all the other stuff. It's alright. It's not levels. David says, going to Mexico on holiday scares me because of the cartel stories I've heard about over the years. Understandable. But then why go to Mexico? There are so many other places you can go where the cartels don't run vast swathes of the country. I mean, Mexico is cheap, to be fair. It's cheaper than Costa Rica. It's cheaper than a lot of places in Latin America. So I guess that's why people go there. And of course, it's quite a big country. It's, compared to Costa Rica and Nicaragua and Panama, much bigger, and therefore more variety but then again, no, not really more variety in terms of places you can go, because there are so few places for tourists to go in Mexico because it's so damn dangerous. So that kind of negates the size of the country, doesn't it? Whereas in Costa Rica, you can go pretty much anywhere. I mean, yeah, there are certain places you would probably want to steer clear of, but there's most of the country, you're going to be fine in Costa Rica. Whereas in Mexico, yeah, you really got to check where you're going before you try to go there. Have I tried Brazilian food? No. Harold says, what led you to travel so much? Backpacking, work, vacations? None of those things. Just, I'm a nomadic person. I like to, I get bored in one place. I haven't yet found what I would call home. Somewhere that ticks all the boxes that I'm looking for. So in the meantime, just travel around and experience different cultures and different food and different environments. I enjoy it. The Celtic Magician says, apparently Korean food in Korea is great, spicy too. All I know about Korea is kimchi, fermented cabbage, which is an interesting national dish, isn't it? Fermented cabbage. And I have had some kimchi, not in Korea, obviously, but, exported kimchi. And it was quite spicy, to be fair. It's quite nice. How's my Spanish? Terrible. Terrible. Since I live in an area which is absolutely flooded with people from the United States, Canada, certain parts of Europe. When you live in an area like this, you literally don't have to speak Spanish. It's bad, innit? But there you go. I'm not very good with languages, truth be told. Afro Jam says kimchi smells bad. The kimchi I had didn't smell bad. Didn't have a particularly strong taste. Okay, Majin Jack says, so is mine, bro. It's only amazing when I need to find the devil's leaf. Well, you know, I spoke about this previously. See, I don't take any substances at all. I don't even drink alcohol anymore. I haven't had alcohol for 7 years. But for those who do take stuff, whether it's the devil's leaf or whatever, some people are surprised, although they really shouldn't be, by the fact that nose candy is actually easier to acquire in Costa Rica than the devil's leaf, if you want to call it, than green, right? It's easier to acquire nose candy. Nose candy everywhere, bro. That's the easiest thing to get hold of. If people are that way inclined. I don't recommend you are that way inclined, right? But people are going to do what they do. The only thing that grows in the hills of Latin America that I ever touch is, well, obviously the fruits and vegetables and stuff, but coffee, you know? Have a coffee once in a blue moon. Imagine Jack says, yes, exactly. See, yeah, the marching powder is, is very easy to get hold of in this part of the world. The nose candy. Somebody saying, time to move to Costa Rica. Come here for the coffee. The coffee's great. Oh, is it? Imagine Jack says, just the greenery here, though. Nothing else. Oh, they don't have the nose candy over in Puerto Viejo. I'm surprised by that because on the Caribbean coast, there's a lot of nose candy business goes on over there, more so than Guanacaste. But in the party towns like Tamarindo and Jaco and all along the Pacific coast, it's just nose candy central, bro. The nose candy's all over the place. Oh, okay. Majin Jack says, no, I meant what I take personally. Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah. The nose candy is all over the place in Costa Rica, bro. It's easier to get hold of than flipping green. The green, for people, is a bit more of a mission to get at times. You know what I mean? The nose candy's damn everywhere. And I would imagine it's good, right? Since it's grown in this part of the world, as the coffee is puro. You know, the coffee is fantastic. Coffee is bueno. I'm showing you how terrible my Spanish is. In Costa Rica, the only Spanish I usually use on a regular basis is pura vida, which is like a ubiquitous saying that ticos, which is the word that people use for Costa Ricans, right? Ticos. It's a saying that they use as a greeting, pura vida, or when they agree on something, they'll say pura vida, or yeah, for various things, they'll keep saying pura vida, which means pure life in Spanish. So if ever you come Costa Rica, you go to a tourist shop and it'll just be full of t-shirts and towels and key rings and everything's got Pura Vida on it. Shade says, have you ever lived in Bahamas? Well, I only migrated from there as a kid to the UK, so yeah. Big up KS. Shade says, have you ever been to St. Vincent? No, I haven't. Never been to St. Vincent. Shade says, isn't it illegal over there? Yeah, as far as I know, but it's like, isn't green, isn't wacky backy, however you want to call it. I'm trying to use a word that won't trigger the algorithm. Isn't sticky green illegal in the UK? But people smoke it everywhere. I mean, London stinks of weed pretty much 365. I've never been to a big city where weed is as ubiquitous as it is in London. I mean, the whole place stinks of weed, even in the nice areas. Over the past few years, it's like everywhere just stinks of weed in London. It's incredible. The devil's lettuce, yeah. The whole place smells of weed. It was never like that. I've spoken in recent live streams about how different it was back in the 80s and 90s in London compared to now. And I can tell you, back when London was more rough, there was nowhere near as much weed on the street other than in Brixton. Brixton was, heavy on the weed even back in the days, maybe even more so than now. But the rest of London, nah. You wouldn't go to like central London or most parts of West London or even North London and just be smelling skunk all over the place. And you certainly wouldn't be going like Hampstead or nice places and be smelling weed. But now you do. It's crazy, bro. The whole of London just smells like cannabis. It's crazy. You'd think it was legal. Agit says, Hatman, do you get less sick now you aren't in the UK? Yes, but I also get far less sick since I quit alcohol. I basically had one or two colds in the past 7 years. And that's the only time I've been sick. I think I've had a cold twice in the past 7 years. How about that? Since I stopped drinking alcohol. Because alcohol, especially when you're drinking spirits and stuff like that, it's destroying all the quote unquote friendly bacteria in your body. So yeah, once I stopped drinking alcohol, 2 colds in the past 7 years. Shout out to Dr. Repper. Great name for the super chat. He says, they could make Kabayel rip a massive bong and he'd still batter. He'd still batter Wilder. I co-sign that comment. Yeah, Wilder's got no chance against Kabayel, or very little chance. Let me just say that. Shout out to Dr. Repper. Great name. Gorguga says a small amount of alcohol is regularly produced by the human body. Well, what is small? And, whatever. But I'm just telling you that alcohol, when consumed, even once every couple weeks, is not healthy for you. I know there have been so many doctors that come out and say, a couple glasses of red wine a week are actually good. Yeah, I don't buy it. I know we have this culture in many parts of the world of alcohol consumption, and they condition you with it in the movies, in television series. Whenever anyone's having fun, alcohol must be involved. whenever anyone's going through an issue in their life, they must reach for a bottle of alcohol. We're conditioned. Do you know what I mean? We're conditioned to drink the stuff all the time. I'm just telling you, since I stopped drinking it, I've had 2 colds in 7 years. I don't think that is a coincidence. Do you know what I mean? I don't think that's a coincidence. The Celtic Magician says, alcohol lowers vitamin C levels and immune system. I try to drink fruit juices if I know I'm going for a few beers. Yeah. And there's more and more information coming out now from, people with a medical background who are highlighting all of the negative health consequences that come from drinking alcohol. In some cultures, like tribal cultures, traditional cultures, they had alcohol as part of like ceremonies. But these ceremonies would only happen a couple times a year. It's not like you'd be drinking it every week. So, I'm making some people here uncomfortable because I have to imagine most people in the chat drink alcohol. Hey, I used to drink alcohol. Yeah? For most of my life, I was drinking alcohol. I'm not judging anybody, but I'm just telling you that since I stopped, I literally never get sick. And it's not like I was ever a really big drinker anyway. I was never somebody that would drink every week. I would go sometimes a year or 2 years without drinking any alcohol quite regularly. And other times I, drink it maybe a couple times a week, and that would last for 2 or 3 months. And then I wouldn't drink it anymore for 4, 5, 6 months, stuff like that. So I've always been a sporadic drinker when I did used to drink. The time when I drank the most was probably as a teenager. A teenager, maybe in my very, very early 20s, but mostly as a teenager. That's when I did the bulk of my, heavy drinking or whatever, as a teenager. Mike says, my ex-missus was an alcoholic in our last couple years. Her family were all heavy recreational drinkers. I get borderline shamed or thought of as weird for not drinking. Crazy it's expected in the UK. Not just in the UK, although the UK definitely has a big binge drinking problem. But Caribbeans are pretty terrible for drinking, bro. Certainly Jamaicans drink far too much. The Caribbeans in general drink too much. And certain African countries, people drink too much. Kenyans apparently drink a lot. South Africans drink a whole lot. So there's plenty of countries around the world where people drink too much. James says, being a doorman must have put you off booze. Yeah, it did to some extent, actually. Yeah, it did to some extent. Like, it made me never want to be drunk again because I realized how embarrassing it is, how foolish people behave when they're drunk and whatnot, and how disgusting drunk people are. Like, when you're sober around a bunch of drunk people, you're like, ugh, don't come near me. Do you know what I mean? Shout out to Dr. Repper again for the super chat. He says, I drink, but I'm too arrogant to care what you say. Hey, standing on business. Shout out to Dr. Repper. And Tony says, I'm not a drinker, but I hate when you go to a wedding and friends and family try to force it on you. I don't know why others get satisfaction from others drinking. Yeah, it's kind of weird. That's what they used to do when I was a bouncer. Because after closing time, depending on what time it closed, some of the places would close at like 2 or whatever. Others would go on, much later. But the ones that closed earlier, like let's say 2, the bouncers would stay behind for a drink afterwards with the bar staff and the manager and whatever in many of the places I worked. And I would never stay behind and drink with them. And it's like they started getting funny with me because I wouldn't stay behind for a drink with them. You know, some people are like, it is weird. I always found it weird. Afro Jam says, when you drink Ray and Nephew's daily, every drink is weak to you. Yeah, Ray and Nephew's, as in the white rum, not only tastes disgusting, it smells disgusting. I don't know how they make that stuff, but there's no other rum that I've tried or know of that smells or tastes like Ray and Nephew. Ray and Nephew is disgusting. It is literally disgusting. I've had rum much stronger than the normal white Ray and Nephew, you know, the one with the green and yellow label. Yeah, I've had rum that's like 75% alcohol, dark rum, and it tasted way better. You know, it didn't taste as strong or smell as pungent as Ray and Nephew. It was easier to drink and it was much stronger. Ray and Nephew's like, what is it, 60% alcohol or something, 65%? I've had ones that are like 75, 80%, and they were easier to drink than Ray and Nephew. Ray and Nephew tastes disgusting. Seriously. It smells disgusting and it tastes disgusting. Shout out to Mr. Luca for the super chat. He says, Kabayel versus Fury is 50-50 life and death. All right. That's the way you see it. It might be. It all depends on whether those body shots of Kabayel's can have the desired effect on Tyson Fury. It's an interesting fight. It's an interesting fight. As I say, out of the 3 former champions that the WBC mentioned in the same sentence as Agit Kabayel, as far as getting a shot against him for the interim belt, those being Deontay Wilder, Anthony Joshua, and Tyson Fury, I think that Fury is by far the more credible fight of the 3. The most credible fight of the 3 against Kabayel. And, you know, I'd probably pick Kabayel over the other 2. But I reckon I'd pick Fury over Kabayel personally, if the fight happens anytime soon. I'm not sure Fury would want to take the fight, though, to be honest. Even though I think he'd probably win it, he doesn't like taking those kind of risks. What's in it for him? Do you know what I mean? He should have to take those kind of risks coming back if he's going to get a title shot. He should have to. Should have to, like the other champions or other ex-champions, work his way back up the rankings. So he should have to, you know, go through a Kabayel to get a title shot, at least. But that's not Tyson Fury's style. Afro Jam says, in Jamaica it goes up to 99%. The UK has a limit on percentage of alcohol. Yeah, but I went to, and this was when I was still drinking back in 2017, I went to, and you can get imports. You know, they have this limit, but I don't know how people get around importing this stuff or whatever, because there are certain places you can go and you can get alcohol that's stronger than 63% overproof limit or whatever. You can get stronger than that in the UK. I went to Turtle Bay in Brixton, which is the only Turtle Bay that I've ever been to that was good. It's Turtle Bay Brixton in terms of just the ambiance and whatever. Turtle Bay Brixton. The other Turtle Bays are all rubbish that I've been to. But Turtle Bay Brixton, they had all kind of rum in there that was way stronger than Ray and Nephew. Way stronger. And they had Ray and Nephew in there too. A shout out to Trolls Are Bad for the super chat. He says, thoughts of, I guess you meant to say on, Harry Greb. Don't know too much about Harry Greb, truth be told. I'm not that much of a boxing historian to, I know who he is, but I can't tell you that I'm a aficionado of his career and stuff like that. There are certain fighters who were from that era, you know, the not even 1920s, talking about 1800s, Harry Greb, right? Late 1800s. Yeah, there are certain fighters from back then who I know a little bit more about, but Yeah, that's way, way, way back in the days. We're about late 1800s. Maybe you're an aficionado and a scholarly historian. You tell us about Harry Greb. Shout out to Trolls About for the super chat. James says, is Fury officially back or is this still speculation? No, it's the WBC saying that if Agit Kabayel wants to defend his interim title while he waits for his shot at Usyk or whoever, he can fight the likes of, if he wants to, Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua, or Deontay Wilder. So the WBC would allow him to do that. Hence, we're talking about the possibility of Fury against Agit Kabayel. But I don't see Fury taking that kind of fight, you know. I don't see it. Yeah, the thing about Turtle Bay and Brixton is that the decor inside is just better than the decor, and the lighting is they've gone to more effort to make it seem Caribbean in the inside. Basically, Turtle Bay and Brixton. And obviously you get a lot more Caribbean people in there, Caribbean people working there, and the music, the vibes, it just has a more Caribbean vibe than any other Turtle Bay I've been to. Particularly, as I say, the decor and just the ambience and the vibe in there is way more Caribbean. The other ones just seem like what Turtle Bay actually is, which is a commercial chain, you know? All of the others seem sterile and they don't really have a strong Caribbean vibe about them. Evil Uncle Phil says, Fury will get stopped by Kabayel. Oh, shout out to, see, we got a Brixtonian in the house right here. Shout out to Boxer. They're trying. Yes, Boxer, long time. Afro Jam says there are rums from basically every country in the Americas. Somebody says body mitts. Not sure what they're referring to by body mitts. Shout out to Ortega. Afro Jam says none taste as bad as Ray and Neff. Yeah, Ray and Neff is diabolical. I don't know why it tastes like that. White rum isn't supposed to taste. I swear down. There's something not right about Ray and Nephews, bro. I don't care. Certain yard man, certain Jamaican man might try to come at me for this, but there's something not right about Ray and Nephews, bro. Why does it taste so weird? It tastes wrong. It tastes like chemicals or something, you know? It smells funky. Now, Evil Uncle Phil says, Ray and Nephew is the perfect budget drink. Just mix it well with ice and a good mixer. Yeah, I'd rather not. You can smell Ray and Nephew. So you can't disguise the smell of Ray and Nephews, bro. You can't disguise the smell of it. Even if you mix it with something, you catch a whiff and you're like, nah, there's Ray in that. It's nasty. Linkage says Ray not even Jamaican owned. Well, a lot of stuff in Jamaica is not Jamaican owned, right? Sadly. Afro Jam says, speaking of Jamaicans, could you speak on the forgotten undisputed cruiserweight O'Neal Bell? The media has tried to write him out of history. Yeah, the guy who stopped Jean-Marc Mormec. He was crazy, O'Neal Bell. In fact, is he still alive? Because he was, I swear I remember him involved in some type of incident where he attacked somebody with an axe. Or did he get attacked with an axe himself? I forget now, but yeah, O'Neal Bell was wild. And he was a good fighter, a forgotten fighter. I'd literally forgotten about him until you mentioned him just now. When you think of cruiserweight, yeah, you definitely, or at least I don't, think of O'Neal Bell. He doesn't spring to mind when I think of cruiserweight. Okay, he was murdered back in 2015. Yeah, well, he was a wild guy, so I'm not surprised. Delgado says, Hatman in Grenada, I have seen it used as petrol. I couldn't believe it. Man, I can believe it. Shout out to Delgado. Afro Jam says, shot dead when he stepped off a bus in Atlanta. Robbery. Damn. That's like Vernon Forrest, right? He got deaded. He got murked, right? In a robbery too. Didn't somebody try carjack him and then he chased after them and they shot him? Vernon Forrest? And that's one thing I'll say for Barbados, right? Barbados rum is better than Jamaican rum. For those of you who do drink and like rum, the rum in Barbados is a lot better than Jamaican rum. I'm just putting it out there. Ayed says, why haven't they promoted Clark versus, well, you put O'Reilly. Riley. Yeah, they haven't really said much about it, have they? They haven't said much about it. And that's a good fight. I hope it's still going ahead. Gino says, hey, Hatman, how do you rate David Tua compared to the other greats of his era? Tua versus Tyson would have been a good matchup. I wouldn't personally describe Tua as a great, but he was a top contender in the 1990s, early 2000s. He was very strong, good hand speed, good power, but very slow feet and quite predictable. Hence, he got outboxed a bunch of times. Chris Bird outboxed him. Lennox Lewis outboxed him. And he was getting outboxed by the likes of Freza Kendo before he eventually caught up with him. He got outboxed by Hasim Rahman both times, really. The first time he caught up with Rahman and it was kind of a controversial ending. The second time they fought to a draw, but many people thought that Rahman was jobbed on the cards and he deserved it. So, yeah, Tua was an exciting fighter in the pocket, but unlike Mike Tyson, he had slow feet. So he wasn't that good at closing you down and taking you out of there, especially, and I'm not having a go at Samoans or anything, but a lot of the Samoan fighters, they allow their weight to get too high. When Tua was in the 220s, he was able to close the distance faster. Like when he fought John Ruiz, for example, he was in the 220s. And that fight ended in a round. No one ever did that to John Ruiz. Not even David Haye many years later when Ruiz was way past his best. Nobody starched him at a round the way Tua did. But that was Tua in the 220s. I think it was about 226 for that. But after the Ibeabuchi fight, which he lost obviously on points, he started piling on all this weight. Coming in the 230s and 240s like a little tank, but he was just slow as hell on his feet. Just no foot speed whatsoever. Maybe he was trying to compensate or overcompensate for what happened in the Ibeabuchi fight, because I guess he thought, he was supposed to go in there and beat Ibeabuchi. Ibeabuchi, believe it or not, was the opponent against Tua. Tua was the A side. He was supposed to go in there and do a job. And maybe Ibeabuchi's strength surprised Tua, and he thought to himself, okay, I need to go and do bunch of weightlifting. I need to pile loads of weight on and be physically stronger. But when he went in, maybe he just didn't realize how good Abeabuchi was, you know, and he was focusing too much on thinking, oh my God, I'm not strong enough for the top boys, not realizing that Abeabuchi is probably stronger than most of the top guys. So, yeah, Tua started piling on all this weight. Some of it was muscle, but a lot of it was fat too. You know, the Samoan diet is very fatty. And he just became a sitting duck for long-range boxers, you know? So he was a fun and good contender, but limited. Shout out to Lawrence for the super chat. He says, I cannot see Wilder winning that one. Breland, considering where he is at today, was doing an excellent job for him. You can see the decline. I agree. Wilder's one of these people who is so foolish that he gets rid of the best people around him. Incredible. Afro Jam says Tua's KO of Mora was mad. Yeah, that was another first round job. Island Grill says, what about Magnum tonic wine? Magnum tonic wine, it tastes like some kind of medicine. That's the best way to describe Magnum. I don't know how that stuff is made, but it tastes like some form of, it tastes nothing like wine. Anyone who's never had Magnum, yeah, it don't taste anything like wine at all. It has like a medicine-y type taste. That's the best way I can describe it. Big up Jay Jr. JA says people convince themselves that Magnum tastes good. Yeah. I mean, it's not as foul as Ray and Nephews, although there's a friend of mine who, you shouldn't be surprised, right? A Caribbean. I think he's half Jamaican, half, half Jamaican, half Dominican, or Dominican, excuse me. Not to be confused with Dominican Republic, but Dominica, the English-speaking Caribbean island. But yeah, he's like half Jamaican, half Dominican. So, drinks like a fish. And I swear he, in the past couple years, has got to drinking Magnum mixed with Ray and Nephew. I mean, I can't even imagine how disgusting that must be. Magnum mixed with Ray and Nephew. I don't even want to think about that. How horrible that must be. Shout out to Lawrence King for the super chat again. He says, I also think both Fury and Wilder lost themselves by fighting each other 3 times, especially those last 2. Yeah, I think that obviously the fights took more out of Wilder than they took out of Fury. I think the third Fury Wilder fight maybe took a bit out of Fury. I don't think the first one took that much out of him, to be honest. I think more so the third one. And the second one took nothing out of him because he was a one-sided fight in Fury's favor. I think really Fury's lifestyle has taken it out of him more so than the Wilder fights. Again, I'm not saying the Wilder fights didn't take anything out of him. They did, but I think it's more so his lifestyle. Blowing up in weight, binge drinking, and all that type of stuff. I think that's really what's taken it out of him. Shout out to B-Tech Grime. He says, thanks for the videos, Hatman. Gets me through the mundane days at work. Big up B-Tech Grime every time. The Instagram legend. Afro Jam says, Dominica speak a French Creole too. Yeah, they do actually. You're right. I think it's mainly English now that they speak. But yeah, they do have like a French Creole thing in Dominica as well. Shout out to Lawrence King for the super chat. He says, yeah, fair point. He doesn't live the life. And that will always catch up with you eventually. As talented as you are, it will catch up with you. Afro Jam says Magnum is made for the bedroom. Well, that's what they say. But I don't believe it. I don't believe that Magnum has any kind of aphrodisiac effect. I think that's just some fake marketing that the makers of that drink put out there because Jamaicans really go for that type of thing. Like, Jamaica must have the most amount of drinks that are marketed towards bedroom performance. It's like Jamaicans are obsessed with coming up with tonics and formulas that make you some kind of bully in the bedroom. Yeah. They always market it in that type of way. In fact, there was something that yardies used to sell called, I think what did they used to call it? Stone? Did they used to call it Stone? Any Jamaican man in the chat, you guys, if you know what I'm talking about, correct me on the terminology, but I swear they used to sell something called Stone, which was like some type of derivative of cocaine. And it would you'd use it to rub on your Johnson. And it would apparently, allow you to last for hours, right? And the yardies used to sell that down in Camberwell. Stone, yeah. See, Boxer knows what I'm talking about. Yeah. Rock Stone. But Stone, I remember it as Stone. He used to sell that stuff. Yeah, Stone. Then they come up to you, outside of the takeaway or whatever. You want to buy Stone? And they give you the sales pitch about what you're going to do to your gal if you use this stuff. You know them way there. Island Grill says bitters, baba roots. Yeah, bitters. Might as well call it butters. Huh? Bitters is foul. Baba roots is okay. Baba roots just tastes like damn vinegar. But bitters, oh my gosh. That's torturous, drinking that stuff. Yo. Certain man here, certain man are laughing a bit too much like they've actually tried Stone. You man must have actually bought it. And Circle says that made me think of Tony Thompson interview where he said his wife might need a wheelchair. Yeah. Afro Jam says there are worse drinks than Magnum. There is a next drink called Wagwan. Evil Uncle Phil says Stone sounds like the real deal. There's no link, bro. You gotta go chat to the yardies outside the patty shop. Yeah? Go Camberwell Green. Outside the patty shop. Chat to the yardies there. They'll sort you out. Kyle says that's a new one on me. Well, I mean, you gotta rate the business mind, right? You gotta rate the business mind. It's like they say that fluoride was a byproduct of what is fluoride originally a byproduct of? Some kind of like industrial waste or whatever. It came from some other industrial process, and they somehow took that byproduct from whatever industrial process, fluoride, which is apparently toxic, and they put it in toothpaste and said, oh, it's going to make your teeth strong. Well, the yardies with Stone, so many of them were obviously selling what they were selling. And they took the derivative and convinced people, yeah, you just rub this on your Johnson and you'll be a new man in the bedroom. Do you know what I mean? Business mind. Shout out to all the people who know what Stone is. Yeah? Man like Delgado, Boxer. You know what it is. Afro Jam says, Hatman, was you ever in Harlesden? Yeah. Been Harlesden a bag of times. There was a horrible little club up there was it Dreams? Is that what it was called? Full of yardies most of the time, was always getting locked off because of shootings and whatnot. And Stonebridge, when they used to have all the big blocks, was a no-go zone. That was one of the places, see, when Brixton back in the days was a no-go zone, you really felt like there's no area that would have you on your toes. But going to Stonebridge back in the days, bro, I was on my toes. Trust me. The way that people looked at you when you're not from there, yeah, Stonebridge was serious back in the days. When they had all the big blocks and whatnot. Serious. So I didn't make it a habit to go there too often. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. The energy was all the way off. Shout out to Lawrence King for the super chat. He says, do you think Dana will have a big challenge on his hands dealing with millionaire boxers as he is used to dealing with fighters living month to month? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And I was saying that earlier on in the chat. How are you going to reduce fighters' pay to the extent that would be on par with UFC fighters? You know, boxers pay. I just don't see it happening, to be honest. I don't see how they can get people to sign up for the league paying them so little when boxing has got a long history of fighters getting paid an awful lot without Saudi involvement, you know? So there'll always be an opportunity there for the legacy promoters to still have a load of talent, because that old economic model still works, where you can pay the fighter 75% and the promoter takes 25%. David says, it's still very dangerous, Halston. Yeah, I'm sure it is, but not like it used to be back in the days. Like late 90s, early 2000s, Halston was a madness. Yeah, Chalk Hill, yeah, went down there too in Wembley. The buildings were the same. You know, they had, is Brent too as well, right? The same borough. Chalk Hill Estate and Stonebridge. I think it's the same borough because they had the same type of buildings, the exact same architecture, them big tower blocks. But yeah, I used to go down Chalk Hill. I used to know a girl down there, a Nigerian girl in Chalk Hill. They got like the big Asda next to Chalk Hill, and not too far from Chalk Hill you had, was it Press Road? And that was a bit mad down there for a little while. Both in Brent, okay. Star Fox says Dana will probably use Stoner's bath soap. Okay, this guy says that it's quite simple when it comes to the UFC model in boxing. Initially, they pay big money, but put all the other fighters on smaller wages over time. The smaller fighters or lower wages will become popular. Yeah, but again, fighters know what boxers of old were getting paid. So the precedent has already been set for what boxers can get paid. This is different to the UFC, different to MMA. What's the most an MMA fighter's ever been paid for a bout? It's nowhere close to what the most a boxer has been paid. You see what I'm saying? So the fighters know the type of money that is possible to get paid in boxing. And promoters have got a long track record of being able to make profitable shows using the old economic model, where fighters can get paid, 20 million, 30 million a fight. So even if they do it in this, gradual way with the new boxing league, there are still going to be fighters saying, hang on, we're not getting paid enough. Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren and Al Heyman and Oscar De La Hoya and so on and so forth, they were paying people, 10, 20, 30 million a fight. using the old economic model in boxing, making a profit, using pay-per-view. It's just that all they did is invert the split, where Dana White is taking 80% of the money and giving 20% to the fighters. In boxing, it's the other way around. And you can still make a profit as a promoter. The television network can still make a profit doing it that way. So there will always be an opportunity for promoters outside of Dana White and Turki Al-Sheikh's boxing league to attract talent using the old model. Do you understand what I mean? So I think it's going to be very difficult for them to pay boxers as little as they pay UFC fighters and be successful. I'm not sure it can be done, to be honest. I think they're going to have to pay them more than UFC fighters. Shout out to Matt for the super chat. He says, did you see that nasty KO from One Time? He's back. Boy, he slept that Aussie hype job. Yeah, I saw it, but I don't think he's back. That boy already got slept in one round by Liam Paro, his countryman, a couple of years back. But yeah, I did see Keith Thurman looking like the middle-aged man he is. Thinning hair. But he did his thing. Afro Jam says, Chalk Hill was a little bit different. South Kilburn and Stonebridge were like for like. I was in South Kilburn too. Remember South Kilburn? To me, Chalk Hill looked the same, like the big buildings, as the Stonebridge buildings. I couldn't tell the difference. Afro Jam says the Asda was built when they rebuilt Chalk Hill in the late 90s, early 2000s. It took up like a third of the old Chalk Hill. They had to move a lot of the man out. Yeah, I remember when I used to go Chalk Hill, they were still demolishing some of the buildings. So it was like in the transition phase. But the Asda was there, and it would have been in the early 2000s when I was going to Chalk Hill. And yeah, they were taking down some of the old buildings, but some of them were still up when I was going there. Somebody in here talking about Magnum and Ray. The devil's combination. A shout out to Lawrence King for the super chat. He said, Buster Douglas got 24 mil for fighting Holyfield in the early 90s. They got no chance of paying them less now. That's my point. That's my point. You've got this legacy of decades, going all the way back to the 80s, where fighters were getting, over 20 million a fight. How are you going to go from that to paying people 600 grand a fight like Francis Ngannou in UFC? I can't see how that model is going to fly in boxing. I can't see it. It's like an Achilles heel for Dana White. Dana White will hate to pay boxers more than he pays UFC fighters a higher percentage, but he's going to have to. I think if it's going to work, he's going to have to. Even long term, he's going to have to. Shout out to Matt again for the super chat. He says, Keith versus Spence will be a great undercard fight or PBC fight. You think Spence is ever going to fight again? Because I'm not sure. I think he might be done, Errol Spence. I'm not sure he's over because he was supposed to fight Fundora, right? And he pulled out. So I think he's done. I think he's had the fight beaten out of him by the car crash and also by Terence Crawford. I think he's done. Whereas Keith Thurman, he didn't have the fight beaten out of him. The fight left him due to marrying that Nepalese girl. Ever since then, he's had weak legs. I don't know what that Nepalese girl's been doing to him, but he ain't been the same since. Afro Jam says, E&J, the evil juice. That is some demonic drink. Yeah, but E&J don't taste that strong, does it? Generally, American drinks, like American spirits, don't taste strong. Like Jack Daniels is not a strong tasting drink. E&J, Hennessy, they're kind of like mild as spirits go. Yeah, they have a mild taste. Afro Gem says, almost every time I drank E&J, I got into mad things. Boxer says, Spence don't seem interested in fighting anymore. Yeah. I think he's just had the fight beaten out of him by Crawford and by that car crash. He's done now. Trolls Are Bad says lots of Eastern Europeans in Stonebridge Harlesden nowadays. Is it? So they're going to turn it into, well, they probably feel at home, some of them, right? With all them big tower blocks and whatnot. Some of the biggest housing estates, what Americans call housing projects, probably in the world, are in Russia, right? Some of the old Soviet era government housing. It's crazy. It's like some dystopian nightmares. Where's that place that Kovalev isn't actually from but claimed he was from? Out in Russia. What's that region called, or that town called? Is it Chelyabinsk? That place looks mad. It's like a forest of tower blocks stretching as far as the eye can see. Full of people drinking hard vodka and smoking 100 cigarettes a day. You know, like that. Reality says, Hatman, I grew up on one of those projects in Eastern Europe. Yeah, they look like tough places to grow up. Very tough. Lawrence says, also with Spence, not only is he probably done, but the PBC guys don't seem able to get dates to fight. Yeah, they're prioritizing Tank, innit? Jupiter String says, hell. Yeah, not too far off. Extremely bleak and grey. Oh, Gayon says, everything in much of Eastern Europe looks bleak and grey. Well, I don't want to say what we're shown of Eastern Europe, at least. Because I ain't been there, but what they like to show of Eastern Europe, a lot of the time, certainly Russia, is these Soviet-era government high-rises. What they call brutalist architecture. And it looks brutal. And Chelyabinsk is supposed to be flipping dangerous out there. And I can imagine it is. You can imagine loads of people like Kovalev coming out of somewhere like that, you know? Ruthless individuals. Lawrence King says, our media manipulate the image of other places too. I went to Mexico for 6 months. I thought it was going to be orange and dangerous. It was amazing. Yeah, they show you certain parts of these countries to give you a certain image of them, right? And then you end up thinking the whole country is like that, and it's not. Somebody mentioned Africa there. Yeah, I mean, the image that you got throughout like the 1980s and 1990s and maybe to some extent up until today of Africa is like little kids with bloated bellies starving with like flies on their face and stuff like that. A lot of people think that Africa's like that, like all the way through, no one's got any money. But the reality is there's people who are fantastically rich in Africa. They've got enormous mansions, the likes of which you won't even see in London. Certain parts of Nigeria and many other places, you get loads of rich people. Obviously, the poverty is there too, but the media will often just focus on the poverty and they'll never show you the affluent side of many of these countries, which absolutely exists. Set says, Hatman, do you reckon going into the Army, Navy, or Air Force in the UK is worth considering? Hell no. Why would you want to go do a thing like that? Why would you want to literally sign your life away for politicians who do not have your best interests at heart to send you off somewhere and, use you as a pawn? Hell no. Do you trust the government? If the answer is no, then there's no reason to join the military. You'd only join the military if you trust the government to do the right thing. If you don't trust them to do the right thing, you don't join. Shout out to Lawrence again for the super chat. He says, can't wear anything nicer than a Casio in London, but you can in lots of supposed dangerous countries that I visited. It's mad. Jupiter's String says, there is serious poverty in Africa. Yes, there is, but there's also an awful lot of affluence. And the point I'm making is they only tend to show you the poverty. Very rarely will they show you the affluence and whatnot. That's why when people go to certain African countries, they're shocked at how developed some of these places are. Because, they make out as though, for one, all African countries are the same. And for two, that, they're all starving kids with bloated bellies and flies on their face and all that. But no, there's loads of African countries that are developed, with large developed areas. Kenya's, particularly Nairobi, is very developed. Rwanda, large parts of Nigeria, so on and so forth. What I will say is, in Africa, they have enormous wealth gaps in Africa. The wealth gaps in Africa are larger than anything in Europe, for sure. Because you have unbelievable wealth in a country like Nigeria. A certain Nigerian man, with wealth that you would not believe. But at the same time in Nigeria, there's people living in abject poverty. Afro Jam says, most countries in Africa, the capital cities are built up well. Yeah, I would say so. The capital cities are... in most African countries are pretty well developed. You have to go to the edges of the capital cities or outside of the capital cities to see real poverty. Rich says, isn't India the biggest divide? Well, yeah, there's going to be a massive divide in India too. Again, there are plenty of rich people in India, but bone-grinding poverty at the same time. I mean, some of the places that people live in India are unbelievable in terms of the poverty. Do you know what I mean? I've seen videos from Bangladesh as well. Some of the slums there, it is absolutely shocking. Shocking. I saw this video, I think it was Bangladesh, where there was what looked like used to be a river running through this town or city. But instead, because it had bridges over the river, but instead, the whole thing was garbage, rubbish, in what used to be presumably a river. Piled high, 10 foot high, up to, touching the top of the bridge. Just a whole river of garbage. I couldn't believe it, bro. I think that was Bangladesh. I was like, damn, that is crazy. I've never seen anything like that before in my life. Shout out to Matt again for the super chat. He says, I've come to know from my years in the USA that there are no shining representations of intelligence and wealth. So much poverty here too, and dumb people. The American experiment, has it worked? That's all a matter of opinion, isn't it? Whether it's worked or not. So this guy, is it Strangingness? Not sure how to pronounce that name. He says, Africa has the most natural resources and wealth in the world, but they're a super top-heavy society, always been that way. Go look up Mansa Musa. I know all about Mansa Musa. Mali Empire, etc. Estimated to be the richest person in history. We're talking about Middle Ages Africa. Yeah. Oh, okay, just to the chat. Yeah, he says, I'm sure Hatman knows, just to the chat. Yeah, Mansa Musa was obscenely rich. Shout out to Ben for the super chat. He says, I think the plan from Turkey is to buy Matchroom Top Rank, Queensbury, Golden Boy, take all their talent, and him and Dana take over boxing much faster than people think. They might do that, but again, I don't see how that model is going to work long term if they intend to pay boxers the kind of low ball purses that they pay MMA fighters, UFC fighters. I just don't see how it's going to work, because as somebody else, and as I've been saying throughout this stream, back in the early 90s, they paid Buster Douglas over $20 million to fight Evander Holyfield. $20 million in 1991 or whenever it was, or 1990. Fighters know this. If Dana White comes in and is trying to pay people, $1 million in their heavyweight champion, they're going to say, hang on, Buster Douglas was getting $24 million back in 1990. The broadcasters have got long-standing relationships that go back decades with these promoters, so they know that the old boxing economic model works and they know it's profitable. And the boxers know that you can do a 75-25 split in the boxer's favor and everyone still makes money. With that legacy in boxing going back decades, how does Dana White and all these other promoters come in and try and all of a sudden pay boxers a pittance? Because there's always going to be a promoter elsewhere that pops up and they're willing to do the old economic model. Do you know what I mean? I just don't see it working unless they're going to pay fighters properly. I just don't see it working. It's like an Achilles heel in their model. Shout out to Matt again for the super chat. It says, Idiocracy, the movie, was banned here because of its chilling similarities to the current US lifestyle. America comes in for a lot of criticism and a lot of it is justified, but the American Constitution, any of you who've actually read it, and a lot of Americans have never even read the Constitution, but those of you who have had a look at the American Constitution, it's the most impressive legal document, if you want to call it that I think I've ever read in terms of enshrining the rights of individual citizens. I've never read anything else like it, like the American Constitution. It gives you so many rights as an individual that they don't have in any other country that I'm aware of. And that definitely appeals to me, Obviously, there are many problems with the United States. Again, they call it the experiment. But that Constitution is impressive. It's a very impressive document. I'm going to have to get back to your chat in just a minute because my tab here is crashed. So I can't actually see the live chat at the moment. It'll usually take a few seconds, maybe up to a minute before I can access this tab again. God, it's annoying when it does this. Am I back in here? Okay, I'm back in. There we go. Don't know why it does that, man. So Matt says 5 3-minute rounds in boxing will be entertaining. Or 5-minute 3-round fights. Okay. 5-minute rounds. Interesting idea. Or 5-minute 5 rounds. Or 5-minute rounds. I see what you're saying. Shout out to June Sports for the super chat. He says, would Buster Douglas be the greatest ever if he was the Mike Tyson version his entire career? No. No, I think it was a case of styles make fights. Buster Douglas was good in many other fights in his career. But he just couldn't quite get to grips with certain styles, like Tony Tucker. Buster Douglas is very good in the Tucker fight. But Tucker started to get to him the later it got, and took Douglas's heart away and stopped him. I'm not saying that version was as good as the version who fought Mike Tyson, but I tell you what, it wasn't far off. So no, I do not at all think that Buster Douglas would be the greatest ever if he was the Mike Tyson version his entire. Not at all. Not at all. He always had weaknesses, even at his very best. He came up against the guy in Mike Tyson who, wasn't the sharpest in that particular fight. And Buster Douglas was emotionally charged because of going up against Mike Tyson for one, but also the death of his mother, who he was very close to. And it was like the perfect storm for Buster Douglas to do a job on Mike Tyson. He had the right style, he threw the right kind of punches, and it was what it was. Afro Jam says Liberia is a former American colony. Yeah, the only, to my knowledge, American colony in Africa was Liberia. That's why their accent is weird. You ever heard Liberians talk? They got a real weird accent. Like it's the Americanized English accent. It's weird. They speak an Americanized form of English. It's very, very weird. But it's like an American accent crossed with an African accent. That's what I meant to say. It's like Americanized African accent. Now, Matt says, is Lamont Roach potentially a Buster Douglas? I don't think so. I don't think Roach is going to catch anyone that off guard and do that kind of job on anyone. Funny enough, I just realized the other day, the guy who Lamont Roach, did he have a draw with this guy or did he lose to him? Let me just double check. Where are we at? Lamont Roach. Yeah, he lost, he had a draw with Orlando Cruz. Now, I knew I'd heard that name before. I was like, okay, who's that? I've heard of Orlando Cruz. He was that gay, that gay boxer, right? The one who used to wear the rainbow color boxing trunks and whatnot. That's who Roach had a draw with back in the days. The loud and proud rainbow boxer. Yeah. He had a draw with him. Okay, this guy says, I was speaking to a lady from Uganda. I absolutely love her voice accent. Yeah. African women in most African countries, and you can exclude South Africa because it's very different there. But in most African countries, the women, the majority of them, tend to have a much more feminine demeanor, softer voices, etc., than women do in the West. Certainly, than black women in the West are so different to black women in Africa. So different. So different. Their energy's different. The tone of their voice, everything is so different. African women tend to be far more feminine in most African countries. Not all of them. There's a lot of like kind of aggressive women in Nigeria, loads of very aggressive women in South Africa. Kenya's got some kind of feminism creeping in there, but the majority of African countries, the women are a lot more feminine and submissive. They have softer voices and stuff like that. And they're more agreeable. They're easier to pair bond with. Women in Africa. So yeah, in Uganda, I've dated several Ugandan girls, and that's how they were. Very feminine, soft voices, and so on. They don't give you no headache. And I'm talking about girls that were born and raised in Uganda, not the ones that were Ugandan parents raised in the West. No, the ones that are born and raised in Uganda with Ugandan accents. Yeah, no headaches. Shout out to Matt again for the super chat. He says, nothing in Lamont's resume made me remotely assume he could outbox Tank and even hurt him. His previous performances didn't show any of those signs. That's true, but they're both from the same part of the country, right? They're both from Maryland. I want to say they're both from Maryland. If Roach is not from Maryland, is maybe from DC. But anyway, that's right by Maryland. So they're both from the same part of the country. They came up in the amateurs together. There's a familiarity there. They sparred a lot. They fought in the amateurs. So, sometimes when a guy knows you, he just knows you. and he's got your number from when you're kids. And maybe, as other people have said, there was no intimidation factor for Roach because he knows Tank so well. Maybe he just knew his moves all these years, So the stuff that he would do against other fighters didn't really work, but he knew what worked against Tank, perhaps from way back in the days. Double M says Tank has some sugar in his tank. Certainly appears to. I'm not sure how or why his fans like to overlook that, when they're going in on his rivals and calling Shakur Stevenson every name under the sun. But when it comes to Tank, it's like, hey, what's with all the sugary behavior? I mean, if that's his choice, that's his choice, right? But when people are throwing mud, somehow Tank don't get any. Reality's Awakened now says, Hatman, thoughts on Daniel Lapin, 6'6", light heavyweight. Usyk claims he is the future of boxing. Is he any good? I haven't seen him. I'll be honest. I haven't seen him. I've heard of him, but I've not seen him. So I'll have to take a look and then tell you what I think. All right, peeps. I'm going to wrap this one up here. As always, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining me on this stream. And a special shout out to everyone who donated via Super Chat. And in fact, before I go, I missed the Super Chat here from Danny. Shout out to Danny. He says, differences between British women and Latinas. RIP Kevin Samuels. Well, I can't really give you a comprehensive breakdown on that because I haven't lived in every, Latin American country. But I would say that in Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Panama, they're a lot more traditional. They're a lot more inclined towards religion, Catholicism specifically in this part of the world. Many of them are married early. By the time they're in their early 20s, late teens, a lot of them are married. And they're just more family oriented in general. They like doing things in family settings and stuff like that. When you go to nightclubs or late night bars and hangouts and whatnot in Costa Rica, you won't actually find a lot of Costa Rican women there. It's normally American women, women from other Western countries, and the Latinas who are there will be from, other Latin American countries, Colombia and, various other places. A lot of them, not even going to lie, are brasses. If you're going to go to nightclubs. Costa Rican women really, you don't find them in nightclubs and all these kind of things. that much. But yeah, they are very family oriented. The ones who you encounter will be working in shops, serving in restaurants, and they're very nice, very polite, feminine, most of them. Got a very nice accent when they talk to you, the ones that can speak English. A lot of them you'll find are quite shy. And yeah, they're very nice. Very nice. But anyway, yeah, gonna draw the curtain on this one. Shout out to everyone who participated in the conversation. And a special shout out to those who donated via Super Chat. I'm gonna just do a final check to make sure I got all the Super Chats in. Let's check here, make sure I read them all. Pretty sure I did, yep. Yeah, I read them all. So shout out to everyone. I'll catch you guys on the other side. Peace.